It has been 2 days since the SS Aqua departed Town and Kalos, and throughout that time, our young heroes from Team Kanto have seen neither hide nor hair of their mentors. Thankfully, they have had plenty to keep them busy, such as training and getting to know the members of Team Kalos. Joe and Clement have quickly become friends as the most academically minded of the group, while Gary and Astrid have struck up a rivalry as dueling strategists. AJ and Karina have plenty to talk about as self-improvement fanatics, and Ash is fortunate enough to have formed a bond with everyone from the rival team. Though Astrid doesn't hold him to the same esteem as she does Gary, she has to acknowledge that by virtue of being one of his region's representatives, he must have his share of battling talent. Clement, on the other hand, has great respect for Ash's tenacity and confidence, taking a shine to him from the very beginning. When AJ and Karina engage in their many little competitions, Ash is more than willing to join in, whether it be eating, racing, or in one bizarre instance who can nap the fastest. However, of all the members of Team Kalos, Alan is the one who interests him the most. The black-haired Colossian tends to keep to himself mostly, though this is not to say that he is rude, but rather withdrawn. When not eating alone, he tends to return to his cabin, or else do some light training between two of his Pokemon. On the second evening, Ash offers Alan his services as a training partner, which the other boy gladly accepts, bringing out his Charmeleon. Ash chooses Pikachu and so calls for a quick attack, but before the little electric type can even make contact with the red lizard, Charmeleon's claws are encased in green aura, and it swipes them sideways, raking across Pikachu and sending it slamming into the deck's railing. Ash runs over to check on his partner, and to his shock finds that Pikachu was taken out in just one hit. Politely, Alan thanks Ash for his help, but thinks that for the time being it would be wiser if Ash trained with someone close to his own level, to avoid further injury to his Pokemon. Part of Ash is angered by this brush-off, but in his heart he knows that Alan is right, and so wrapping Pikachu in his vest, he runs down to the ship's medbay. This time Ash stays with Pikachu while he's being treated, watching from a safe distance as to not get in the nurse's way. A mix of complicated emotions churn inside Ash, from regret at getting Pikachu into this condition, disappointment at how easily Alan beat them, and worry about what this means for his chances in the tournament. As he waits, Lieutenant Surge approaches Ash and tells him that he saw that battle unfold from the bridge, calling it a rough time. Ash nods, and so Surge pats him on the shoulder with one of his giant ham-like hands, saying that thankfully he knows a way that next time Pikachu faces that Palooka Charmeleon, he'll win without a doubt. Ash gives an inquiring look, and Surge grins that he's going to teach Pikachu how to use Volt Tackle. Ash asks what Volt Tackle is, and Surge explains that it's the ultimate electric move, invented by Red himself, to remove all the limiters a Pokemon instinctively puts on their own strength. It is pure power, but it comes with the drawback that a Pokemon can't use it without hurting himself a bit too. Ash is unsure, especially with Pikachu's current condition, but Surge tells him it's an open offer, so when he and Pikachu are ready, they should come find him. It is late evening when Pikachu is discharged, and Ash wants to talk to him about this training with Surge, having decided that the decision should be Pikachu's, as he is taking all of the risk. However, his growling stomach tells him that first the pair need some dinner. Despite the hour, they are not alone in the dining hall. Blue is there, looking very tired as he makes his way through a sandwich. When he spots Ash and Pikachu, he greets them and invites them to join him. Ash grabs some food for himself and his partner and joins Blue, asking how the planning is going. Blue replies that it's going well, but it's still a long way away from them actually being ready. He then fondly adds that Red is running himself ragged trying to make it perfect, since he's really excited for all the kids to be able to show off the fruits of their training. Ash nods that this sounds like his mentor, before asking where the tourney is actually being held. Blue replies that they settled on a bit of property that he and Red won betting on a backer match, and Ash jokes that he bet Red's a fan of the Jubilife Reds for sharing his name. Blue shakes his head at this, saying that he and Red actually are longtime supporters of the Cianwood Greens. That reminds Ash of something Gary said, and so he asks Blue who Green is. This gives Blue pause, and after mulling over his words, he tells Ash that she was his and Red's childhood friend and occasional companion on their journeys. Ash says he figured it would be something like that after what Gary said, though he wonders why Red never mentioned her, since he mentioned his other childhood friend, that being Blue, quite frequently. Blue sighs that he supposes Red wouldn't like to talk about Green, since they didn't exactly part on great terms, and he hasn't had the chance to reconcile with her yet. This only piques the 10-year-old's interest, and he eagerly asks to know what happened, but Blue shakes his head again, saying that's something Red will discuss with him when he's ready. This annoys Ash, who says that Blue could at least tell him what happened to her, and why he's never heard of her if she's friends with the famous Red and Blue. Blue smirks that he's never heard of her because she never wanted to be heard of, preferring to operate out of the public eye. What happened to her? Well, she went away around the same time Red left, and he's pretty sure she doesn't exist anymore. This puts something of a dampener on the mood, and Ash starts to apologize for bringing her up, but Blue says it's fine, since he can see Ash is a lot like Green in fact. They both have the annoying knack of wheedling information out of people, even when they don't want to give it. He then rises and heads towards the corridor which will lead back to the planning room, before adding that Ash should probably head to bed soon, since they'll be arriving in Galar in a few hours, and he has something planned for them which starts before sunrise. The next morning, as promised, Ash is roused by Red, who tells him to meet him up top in 10 minutes and bring his backpack. Ash does as he's told, and in the pre-dawn light, our hero along with Gary, AJ and Joe assemble on deck where Red is waiting for them. Red announces that while he and the Aqua will be heading further south to retrieve the members of Team Galar from Professor Magnolia's lab, Blue has organised a trip to the wild area, an unspoiled natural paradise where Pokemon from around the world live in harmony. This excites Ash, Gary and AJ, all of whom declare their intention to catch strong Pokemon there. However, Joe requests to be allowed to stay with Red so that he can see the lab. The champ agrees to this, and so begins to lead the remaining 3 boys along the side deck. Eagerly, AJ asks how they're getting to the wild area, and in a jovial voice, Red replies that since the SS Aqua is too large to ford the Motostoke River, the trio will have to take a rowboat. Gary complains that with how cold it is, they'll freeze in something so exposed to both wind and water, but Red, still grinning, replies that he has some great news for the younger oak then. Gary asks what it is, and Red smirks that he'll be nice and toasty, since he's just volunteered to be the one who does the rowing. In that tiny little vessel, it takes Ash, AJ and Gary well over an hour to row their way along the Motostoke River, the wind and water being just as cold as Gary had predicted. When they finally hit land at the point Red told them about, the sun has risen, and Blue is waiting for them, roasting marshmallows on the tail of his Charizard. Furiously, Gary asks why they couldn't have flown on Charizard as well, and Blue smirks that he thought this was more character building, though if his cousin stops whining, he might consider letting them fly back. He then addresses the group as a whole, and tells them that as Red has no doubt told them, the wild area is home to a number of exotic Pokemon, so as a bit of fun, he has a challenge for the 3 of them. Whoever catches the rarest Pokemon by the time the sun reaches the highest point in the sky wins. This sets the boys to clamoring, with questions like what they will win and where to find the rarest Pokemon, but Blue just smirks that their timer has already begun, so they can either stand around talking or they can get to catching. He then adds that he doesn't want them getting greedy and catching dozens of Pokemon that they will just abandon in his Gramps' lab, so as an added rule, each of them is only allowed to catch 1 Pokemon, meaning they had best be sure on their choice before they throw a Pokeball. Ash, AJ and Gary nod their agreement then split up, with Gary heading north, AJ heading south, and Ash staying in roughly the same area. Ash quickly loses himself in the natural splendor of the wild area, being enamored with all the species of Pokemon he's never seen before. At one point he thinks he's found the Pokemon he wants to catch, a little pink imp whose playful demeanor reminds him a lot of his Clefairy, and so he brings it out to battle. However, this proves a critical error, as the pair of pranksters don't so much battle as wage a prank war, one that Clefairy wins, causing the imp to run away in tears. After this, Ash encounters a fiery rabbit Pokemon, who he thinks is quite cool with its speedy movements. However, here disaster strikes as well, not by any mistake made by him or his Pokemon, but because the fire type simply does not like the look of Ash, and so it kicks a fireball at his head, trying it seems to turn him into his namesake. Ash dives out of the way of the fireball, barely avoiding it, but this gives the rabbit Pokemon the chance it needs to escape. By now midday is fast approaching, and Ash is still 0 for 2, and he can't help but wonder how Gary and AJ are doing. Flopping down and sprawling on the grass, the young man closes his eyes to just enjoy the feeling of the sun on his face. Even if he can't find a rare Pokemon for Blue, he's still had a lot of fun here. Then he feels a tap on his cheek, and opens his eye to see Pikachu frantically pointing at something up above them. Looking up, he sees a swarm of blue flying-type Pokemon passing overhead, but then notices what Pikachu is trying to show him, that bringing up the rear is a differently coloured flying type, with grey plumage rather than blue. Excitedly, Ash exclaims that a shiny Pokemon will surely be the rarest of the lot, remembering what Red told him about shiny Pokemon. This loud declaration startles the flock of flying types, with several of the smaller birds attempting to scatter. However, the odd-coloured member remains calm, performing a sharp aerial turn so that it may face Ash, placing itself between him and its flock. It then lets out a loud call of Corvisquire, which sounds like a warning, but something in this annoys Pikachu, who barks back a rebuke, electricity crackling from his cheeks. The grey bird responds with a haughty chirp which is clearly meant as derision, before squawking something to its flock, then touching down on the ground. Pikachu in turn steps up to battle, and as Corvisquire begins to sharpen its claws against each other, Pikachu leaps in with a forceful quick attack. This attack hits hard, and the avian Pokemon goes staggering back for a moment, but then recovers itself long enough to coat its wings in dark energy and thrust it upward like a blade. Pikachu's speed and recent bad experience with Dragon Claw allow it to dodge the power trip and fire off a Thunderbolt at point-blank range which blows the bird back some more. But stalwart as ever, Corvisquire gets back to its feet, and after briefly ruffling its feathers, stares Pikachu down once more. At Ash's command, Pikachu uses Thunderbolt again, but this time Corvisquire raises its other wing, from which bursts a shield of light to protect it from the Thunderbolt. It then couches its other wing like a lance, and upon coating it once more in this umbral energy, soars forward and drives into Pikachu's stomach. Pikachu recoils, and so Corvisquire presses the advantage by using Pluck to peck Pikachu on the head. Pikachu slams chin first into the dirt, and Ash can't help but think if it only knew Volt Tackle this wouldn't be an issue. Corvisquire then takes a step back and levels its blackened wing to Pikachu's head, screeching something that might be an order to yield. However, Pikachu, just like its trainer, has far too much tenacity to ever yield, and so with a cry of its own, lets out a massive thunderbolt which fills the area, shattering the ground and even splitting a nearby tree. When it stops, Corvisquire lies several feet away, twitching from both injury and paralysis. But even now it is not bested, and so with a fierce determination in its eyes, the grey bird rises to its feet. Pikachu approaches, ready to resume, but when they are within a close distance, Corvisquire drops to one knee, bowing its head in submission to Ash and Pikachu. Furious caws from the Rookity and Corvisquire up above fill the air, but the grey Corvisquire turns back to squawk something solemn, and the flock falls silent. Then, without another sound, they depart, leaving the battlers alone. Ash approaches now and says that he thinks he understands. Corvisquire thought they were an enemy, and so was just trying to protect its friends, right? Corvisquire nods respectfully, and Ash pats it on the head, grinning that they're a lot alike. They both care deeply for their friends and want to protect them no matter what. Corvisquire nods again, and so Ash asks if it would like to become one of his friends, and grow strong together so they can always stand up for the people and Pokemon who need it. Corvisquire flaps his wings eagerly at this proposal, and so withdrawing a Pokeball, Ash taps the shiny Pokemon on the head, adding it to his team. When Ash returns to the meeting place, Gary and AJ are already there, with the former smirking that Ashy Boy is late as ever. Ash retorts that maybe, but he's definitely got the best Pokemon for Blue's task. Gary raises his eyebrows and says his new Pokemon may beg to differ, while AJ declares that Ash is dreaming since he searched far and wide and has returned with the ultimate catch. Blue, who has been watching all this, says that if each of them is so confident, they should bring out their Pokemon, an order which the three boys happily comply with. Gary is first, and his Pokemon looks like the ghost of a dragon, which Blue praises as the pseudo-legendary Dreepy, telling his cousin that if he trains it well, it will become something truly incredible. Next up is AJ, who brings out a Farfetch'd, but not a normal Farfetch'd. This one is bigger, with darker plumage, a noticeably foul temper, and a bigger leak. AJ grins that this must be a really rare Farfetch'd, since it's not like any back home, and Ash notices that one of his teeth is now missing. He asks his friend if Farfetch'd did this, but AJ admits that it was actually Barbaracle, who he brought out to battle Farfetch'd, but instead it punched him in the face, so he had to switch to Charmander. Blue cuts in here to say that AJ is correct that this Farfetch'd is very rare, calling it a regional variant found only here in Galar. AJ cheers that this definitely means he wins, but Ash proudly states that he has a shiny Pokemon, before bringing out Corvisquire. The bird cuts a regal figure with its grey plumage resembling Scowl Mail armor, and when Blue pulls out his Pokédex to examine it, he concludes that it is indeed a shiny. He then sighs that he thought it would be easy to determine who had the rarest Pokemon, but they've all done well for themselves, so we'll give them each a copy of the prize. He then pulls out 3 small books, each with the title Secret Earth Arts on the cover. Though this is not the shocking part. What really startles the boy is the author's name, Giovanni. Gary demands to know why his cousin has something written by Giovanni, to which Blue replies that he found it in the Viridian gym after inheriting it from the Team Rocket boss. He then elaborates that in spite of what a scumbag Giovanni was, and is the only one here who actually fought him, he can attest that the man was a monster. He knew how to raise a ground type like no one else. and that by implementing some of the strategies in the book, Blue admits that he grew exponentially in a very short amount of time. Ash says he feels dirty holding something written by a man like Giovanni, after all Red's told him, but Blue reassures him that this isn't Giovanni's copy, this is an amended edition that he created with his own findings, which, unlike Giovanni, put respect for one's Pokemon at the center of its philosophy. This mollifies the boys, and so Blue tells them they should get going, since it's about time that Red should be returning with the Galar team, and they ought to make a good first impression by not being late. Everyone agrees, and so with the help of Blue's Charizard towing them, they return to the SS Aqua much quicker than they departed it. When they arrive, 6 new faces are already on the deck chatting with Red, Joe, Diantha, and the other members of Team Kalos. When he sees them, Red teases that it's good of them to join them, and then proceeds to introduce the newcomers to Ash, Gary, AJ, and Blue. The coach of Team Galar is introduced as Leon, the champion, though an elderly man by his side adds that he is also a former champion, Leon's mentor and co-coach of this team, going by the name of Mustard. After them are the representatives, the first being Leon's younger brother, who Red calls Hop, followed by a pale boy in a thick pink coat, who scowls that his name is Bede. It rhymes with concede, which they should all do, since he's the obvious winner, handpicked by Chairman Rose himself. Next is a quiet girl, who solemnly says that her name is Marnie of Spikemouth, and finally a boy with a thick white mask over his limp black hair shuffles forward, and says nothing. Leon cuts in that Alistair is just shy, but he's sure he'll open up with time. And speaking of shy, Ash spies another unfamiliar face here on deck, this time perched on Joe's shoulder. Wondering loudly what the Pokemon is, Ash approaches it and Joe, only for it to burst into tears and then vanish. Ash panics at this, saying he's sorry and didn't want to make it cry, but Joe tells him it's alright. His new friend is a Sobble, and they're known for their timid personalities. He then explains that Professor Magnolia gave it to him after learning that he didn't have a proper starter of his own. Ash beams that that's so cool, and Joe smiles that yeah it is, before excusing himself to go calm Sobble down. And with that, the Aqua sets off for its next destination. Over a late lunch, Ash and AJ regale Red with the events of their morning in the wild area. Red is impressed with their catching acumen, up until they reveal the nature of Blue's competition to find the rarest Pokemon, which seems to sour his mood somewhat. This only grows darker when Ash rather thoughtlessly shows Red what Blue gave them. Seeing the book, Red gives his old rival an unimpressed stare, and mutters that it's a fitting prize, considering that the task reminds him of what Giovanni had his henchmen do. He then excuses himself, saying that he's lost his appetite, with Blue soon chasing after him. Feeling a little snubbed, and remembering his thought during the battle with Corvisquire, Ash decides to seek Surge out, and ask for his help in learning Volt Tackle. The lieutenant is happy to oblige, and so the pair head down to the battlefield, only to find that it's currently in use by Marnie and Astrid, who are locked in a battle between Astrid's Absol and Marnie's Morpeko. Showing his impatient streak, Surge then suggests they head to the exercise gym below deck, since it's the next best place to train. However, this too is in use, with AJ, Charmander, Sandshrew, and Galarian Farfetch all lifting weights, while Barbarical glowers at them from a corner. AJ waves to Ash and Surge, asking if they want to pump iron with them, but Ash declines, and asks Surge where they should go now. Surge suggests the boiler room, since it's pretty sturdy and he's certain no one's there. The lieutenant is right in this, and so with a large corridor of steam pipes at their disposal, Ash and Pikachu ready themselves, with Surge bringing out his Raichu. Ash eagerly asks if Surge's Raichu is going to show them Volt Tackle now, but Surge laughs that Raichu doesn't know Volt Tackle, none of his Pokemon do, but after so many years, he's come to understand the principle, and so can pass that along to Ash and Pikachu, since he believes they are the only ones worthy of using Red's ultimate technique. And so, the real work begins. As a mentor, Red is a taskmaster, but Surge is a drill sergeant, not allowing Ash and Pikachu a moment's rest until they complete their assigned tasks. For Pikachu, this starts with training alongside Raichu to use its full potential without any restraint, since if it gives anything less than 100%, Volt Tackle will fail. However, Pikachu is not the only one working, since Surge is a big believer in squad unity, and so for every second Pikachu is working to tap into his full potential, Ash is doing the same, either through physical exercise or studying the ins and outs of electric Pokemon with the lieutenant. This is something neither trainer nor Pokemon can master in a day, and so at 2 AM, after over 12 hours of non-stop work, Surge does allow them to return to their cabins to sleep, but warns them that he expects them back here at 5 AM to continue their training before he goes on his shift. Ash and Pikachu comply, and so the next morning after wolfing down a quick breakfast, Ash and Pikachu return to training under Lieutenant Surge's watchful gaze. For 4 more hours they work before Surge leaves them, though the big man grins that he's not letting them slack off just because he's absent, bringing in Clement as a fellow electric-type specialist to supervise until he gets back. Clement is a kinder teacher, though Ash struggles more with him than he did with Surge, since Clement has him focus exclusively on academic training, going into some really high-level theories that bamboozle the young Cantonian. Even when Surge returns in the early evening, Ash and Pikachu have not yet mastered this first step, though the Vermilion Gym Leader praises that he can see they've both grown a lot. As a reward, he tosses them each a bar wrapped in a foil packet, which he calls a field ration. Ash comments they're a little like the ration bars his mum made for him when he left Pallet Town, causing Surge to give Ash an odd look before asking if his mother is ex-Team Rocket. Ash chokes a little at this, and snaps that his mum would never join an evil team, but Surge shrugs that it's a legitimate question, since those bars are a Team Rocket recipe designed by their top scientists to keep agents on their feet for extended missions. Ash obstinately repeats his prior claim about his mum, before asking how Surge has these if they're made by Team Rocket. Surge blasely replies that he was a member of the Team Rocket Command Triad back in the day, but turned over a new leaf after a run-in with Red and his buddies. This shocks Ash, but Surge tells him not to get all worked up, since everyone has stuff in their past they're not proud of. What matters is who they are now. Ash isn't sure how to feel about this, and so while he thinks it over, Surge has him and Pikachu get back to work. Several hours later, Pikachu finally outputs enough power that the Lieutenant feels satisfied to say that it has reached 100% efficiency. However, the exertion of such a feat promptly knocks the electric rodent out, and so Surge calls it a night. It takes almost a full day of treatment for Pikachu to get back on its feet after that, during which time Ash does some training with his other Pokemon, honing Sandslash's new strength from evolution, Clefairy's Moonblast, and getting to know Froakie and Corvisquire better. From this he comes to understand that Corvisquire's battling style greatly resembles that of knightly combat, with an emphasis put on honor, chivalry, and fair play, while Froakie's ethos is all centered around its drive to grow stronger, alongside its training in any way that it can. For this reason, he begins working with the latter on harnessing its full power, similar to what Surge has been doing with Pikachu, and even has it join him and Pikachu when Surge summons them back down to the boiler room. Now with Pikachu able to use its full power, the next thing Surge has Pikachu learn is how to maintain that level of output. And unsurprisingly, this too takes time, with Pikachu fainting more than once from sheer exertion. As a result, by the time they reach the Sinnoh region several days later, Pikachu has still not mastered this skill. Docking south of Sandgerm Town, Red and Blue announce their intention to head into town to collect the Sinnoh team, while Diantha, Leon, and Mustard all express their desire to travel to other parts of the region, offering to bring along anyone who is interested. Ash, Joe, and Lan decide to go with Red and Blue, while the remainder of Team Kalos go with Diantha to Hearthome City via her Gardevoir's teleportation. Gary joins Mustard on his Corviknight bound for Iron Island, while Marnie, Hop, and AJ ride with Leon on the back of his Charizard to Pastoria City. This leaves Bede and Alistair on the boat, but neither of the loners mind this very much, since Bede declares that he can finally get some real training done without those other losers spying on his strategies, while Alistair says nothing, and just goes below deck again. The flight to Sandgerm Town is a short one for Aero and Charizard, and when they land outside the lab, a tall blonde woman with regal bearing stands waiting for them with a gaggle of young trainers by her side. Ash counts 7, and so gives his mentor a questioning look, since all the other teams have been made up of 4 trainers. Red explains that since they didn't have time to go back for them, Team Johto agreed to meet them here with Team Sinnoh. The woman, who Blue calls Cynthia, nods, singling out 3 of the young trainers and bidding them to introduce themselves as her team. The first is a green-haired, bespectacled young man, who calls himself Conway, the unrivaled master of strategy, causing Ash to mutter that the Aqua might sink under the weight of all these big heads. After him is a subdued girl, who in contrast to Conway, respectfully introduces herself as Marley, and then to round out the trio is an exuberant boy, who calls himself Buck, brother to the Elite Four's one and only Flint. Ash, however, remains confused, since 3 is still the wrong number, and Cynthia elaborates that her final team member is currently at Lake Verity with Lance. Red admits that he was hoping to check out the lake before they left, and so he and Ash volunteer to go fetch the final representative. Cynthia accepts, and so the pallet pair depart through Professor Rowan's lab, following a secluded forest path which will eventually lead to the lake. Above them, the sky turns a murky grey, and Ash sighs that he hopes it doesn't rain. However, rain is the least of their worries, when moments later something collides with his head. Looking up, he sees an orange Pokemon leaping from tree to tree with his cap on its face, seemingly blinding it. Wanting to retrieve his cap and help the poor Pokemon, Ash gives chase. Red tries to follow, but is cut off when a group of Zangoose barge past him, clearly adamant on chasing the small orange Pokemon down. Knowing that Ash could be caught up in the crossfire if he battled the Zangoose, the champ instead decides to look for another way round to meet up with him, trusting his protege to be able to hold his own until then. By now the Zangoose are hot on Ash's trail, snarling and clawing at him in their attempt to get to the little fire type. Ash doesn't think this is very fair, since it's currently blinded, and so calls on Pikachu and Froakie to deal with them. Thunderbolt and several handfuls of thrown frubbles deter a few of the Zangoose, but the most voracious of the lot simply leaps over the attackers, finally wrapping its claws around the orange Pokemon. As Zangoose and its prey hit the ground, causing Ash's cap to fly off, he sees that it's a Chimchar, though something is wrong with it. Its eyes are turning from the usual white to bright pink, and its flame tail, poking out from between Zangoose's trunk-like arms, is growing abnormally large. Chimchar then lets out a mad shriek and buries its teeth into Zangoose's shoulder. Instinctively, the cat ferret releases its hold over Chimchar, though this proves to be a mistake, as the now freed ape coats itself in flames and bowls over the top of its attacker with a supercharged flame wheel. As the main Zangoose falls, Chimchar turns its wrath on the others who were chasing it, showing no concern for the fact that as it tears through the trees, several of them catch alight. Frantically, Ash tries to stop a forest fire from breaking out, and so has Sandslash come out and use Sand Attack, while Froakie uses a mix of Water Pulse and its own flame retardant frubbles to extinguish the little flames. Thankfully, it doesn't take them too long, but by the time they have stopped the fire from spreading, the remaining Zangoose have been summarily defeated, and a scorched path through the trees tells them where Chimchar is gone. Running at top speed, Ash and his Pokemon find themselves on a cliff top where Chimchar lays, looking fatigued. Between it and Ash stands a boy with purple hair, who bends down to speak with the fire type. At first, Chimchar seems to consider what he is saying, but when it sees Ash, and remembers how he tried to defend it from the Zangoose, Chimchar scampers away from the purple-haired boy, and towards Ash. Turning around, the stranger snaps at Ash, demanding to know what he's doing and why he's interrupting his capture. Ash burrs under this tone, and so shoots back that he's not interrupting anything. He just came to see whether Chimchar was alright, which clearly the other boy doesn't care about if he's trying to catch it in this state. The purple-haired boy scoffs for Ash to cry him a river, before ordering him to stand aside, since he's not going to pass up a chance to add something with that much firepower to his team. Ash yells that he doesn't care what the other boy wants. He's taking Chimchar to Nurse Joy, and then when it's healed they can discuss this. This does not go over well with the stranger, who draws out a Pokeball, and with steel in his voice tells Ash to move or else. Ash remains resolute, and the other tells his Turtwig to stand by for battle, but before he can throw the ball, Red steps into view. This gives the purple-haired youth pause, clearly recognizing the champ, and when Red hands Ash his cap saying that he must have dropped it in a friendly tone, he disengages, knowing better than to pick a fight with someone who has such powerful friends. Scowling, he then stalks away, saying they must be here to pick up him and his teammates for the tournament, so he'll meet them back at the lab. When he is gone, Red asks Ash what his problem was, and Ash replies that he's a jerk who clearly has no respect for Pokemon's welfare, for picking up Chimchar and asking Red if they can take it back to the ship for healing. Red hands Ash Arrow's ball and tells him that flying will be the quickest way, which his student acknowledges, thanking Red as he recalls his other Pokemon, then climbs onto the Aerodactyl's back with Pikachu on his shoulder and Chimchar still in his arms. Taking flight, the last thing Ash sees before the forest becomes a blur under Arrow's speed is the purple-haired boy, methodically catching each of the Zangoose and scanning them with his Pokédex. With just one rider, Arrow is unencumbered enough to fly at top speeds, arriving back at the SS Aqua in only a few minutes, despite having been past Sandgem Town when they took off. Ash gratefully pets the fossil Pokemon, then runs down to the medical bay to have Chimchar's wounds tended to. By now, all the nurses are quite familiar with Ash, and so are happy to help with Chimchar. While he waits for Chimchar to be healed, Ash heads back onto the deck to examine Sinnoh's coastline. However, he isn't alone long, as soon Red, Blue and the teams from Sinnoh and Johto arrive as well. As expected, the purple-haired boy is there, who Ash soon learns is named Paul, though in truth he is far more interested in the members of Team Johto, having watched Lance the Dragon Master enough times on TV to know that any team he assembled will have some serious power. Lance introduces his representatives as Thornton, Faulkner, Jasmine and Whitney. Ash steps forward to introduce himself, eager to get to know them, but is tapped on the shoulder by a nurse who informs him that Chimchar is awake. Rushing downstairs, he finds the fire monkey in high spirits, its eyes and tail flame now looking like they ought to. Red joins him and smiles when he sees that it is alright, saying that he's proud of Ash for looking after the little fire type. Ash says he was just doing what anyone would do, but Red shakes his head, saying that most wouldn't, and that Ash has a lot of heart. He then asks the boy if he intends to catch it, and Ash, having not really thought about what to do with Chimchar beyond making sure it is safe, looks up at it, asking if he would like that. Chimchar doesn't hesitate, hopping up and down and chittering eagerly, which Red grins he thinks means yes. Pulling a ball from his belt, Ash holds it out to Chimchar, and when the small simian fist bumps the button, it dissolves into red light. The others don't return until late into the night, or at least that is Ash's best guess, as he is down in the boiler room again, training with Pikachu when he feels the SS Aqua moving. This next trip is a shorter one than the last, but during this time Ash and Pikachu are finally able to maintain their power output, and so move on to the next step, moving at high speeds while utilizing this power. Thankfully, here they have the advantage of Red's speed training, and so are able to adapt to this skill much faster than Surge had expected. And so by the time they reach Unova, Pikachu can actually use a passable Volt Tackle, or rather, he can in 1 out of every 3 times he attempts it. This time, when the teams are all called up on deck, it is so their respective coaches can give them instructions. Due to Team Unova's coach being laissez-faire to the point of debatably not actually being a coach, their team is scattered all across the region. For that reason, the coaches are calling upon their students to split up and retrieve everyone, since if they had to do it alone, they'd never make it back in time to meet their departure deadline. Looking around, Ash sees that several new friendships and rivalries have blossomed during his training, most notably Joe and Alistair, whose shared timid nature seems to have brought them together. Conversely, Thornton and Conway are shooting each other filthy looks from opposite ends of the deck, while Karina, Marnie and Whitney chat like old friends. However, there is little time for Ash to form any new bonds, as he is promptly paired up with AJ and Gary again, and told to head to Floccesy Ranch via Burbank City. AJ beams that he grew up on the ranch, to which Red gives his second apprentice a knowing smile, before calling this a fortuitous coincidence, since that might mean he might know the 2 people he has to collect, Alder, the team coach, and Benga, his grandson. This dims AJ's smile a bit, though he says that he does, and Red's knowing look becomes a bit more somber as he pats AJ on the shoulder, promising that he knows exactly what AJ is feeling right now, and though it's hard, he will feel better afterwards. AJ smiles that he trusts his master, and Red calls him a good lad, before wishing both him and Ash happy hunting, and telling them to meet him in Nimbasa City by nightfall. The trio reach Verbank on the back of Gary's Blastoise, a fact which the water-reversed Charmander is none too happy about, and AJ promptly directs them up a westbound road which will take them to Floccesy Ranch. As they pass, Ash notices a lot of people giving them furtive looks and muttering to each other. He queries this with AJ, who seems to be the cause of the looks, but the green-haired youth irritably tells his friend to ignore them, before picking up his pace as they head out of town. AJ continues to give off an air of irritation all the way up the rural route, and doesn't show any sign of calming until a large ranch comes into view. Gary asks if this is the place they're looking for, and AJ nods that it is, jumping the fence and rushing in the direction of Floccesy Ranch with Charmander close on his heels. Ash and Gary give chase, but before long are stopped by the sound of snarling, followed by an order to halt from behind them. Turning around, Ash, AJ, and Gary see a herdia with its hackles raised, while a flame-haired boy looks down on them from a tree branch. When he sees AJ, the boy leaps from his perch and storms forward, grabbing AJ by the front of the shirt and demanding to know what he thinks he's doing showing his face around here. However, that is not the only odd thing the stranger does, as he identifies AJ as Allie, which seems to incense the green-haired youth, prompting him to grab his assailant by his shirt fronts as well, and order him not to call him that. The redhead sneers that he forgot. Precious Allie is too good for, but just what AJ is too good for, Ash never learns. As at that moment Charmander sets the newcomer's foot on fire, for threatening its trainer. As the red-haired boy howls in pain, AJ shoves him away, then picks Charmander up in a hug, thanking it for defending him. Charmander growls happily, while Ash brings out Froakie to have it use its recently learned firefighting skills to put out the other's foot. The Unovan boy shows no gratitude for this help, sneering that he could have done that himself, before demanding to know what these trespassers are doing on his land. Gary answers that they're here for Champion Alder and his grandson Benga, who, if he's not much mistaken, is who this loudmouth jerk is. Benga scowls that that's right, and Gary matter-of-factly says that he should come with them, since they're all meant to meet up in Nimbasa later on. Benga boasts that he won't be going anywhere with Ali, then throws a Pokeball into the air from which bursts a Dragonair. He then orders Dragonair to take him to Nimbasa City on the double, and the dragon type swiftly coils its tail around its trainer's waist before lifting off. Then, as a parting gift, Benga jeers that it looks like they've wasted their time coming here, since his Gramps is off at the league right now, before sticking his tongue out at AJ as he is carried out of sight. Gary scowls that he can't stand guys like Benga, while behind him, Ash whistles innocently, having noticed several similarities between the grandson of Alder and the way both of his companions used to be before training with Red and Blue. He then asks what the others want to do, and AJ says that if it's alright with them, he'd like to stop off and visit his mum. Ash and Gary nod, with the latter saying that he'll use the phone there to call Blue and update him on the Alder situation, and so the trio of boys plus their Pokemon set off. It doesn't take them long to reach the ranch house, and when they step inside, a middle-aged woman is there to meet them. Smiling as though her heart might burst with joy, she wraps AJ in a hug, exclaiming that she's so happy to have her Ally back, before correcting herself and calling him AJ. AJ returns the hug, saying that he's happy to see her too, in a way which makes Ash miss his own mother. AJ's mother then introduces herself to Ash and Gary, with the Oak Boy politely asking to use her phone. She readily agrees, and so as the pair depart, Ash sidles up to AJ, wanting to ask what the story is behind the name Ally. However, such thoughts are quickly forgotten as AJ gasps with surprised happiness when a Mareep with a bell around its neck wanders into the room. Eagerly, AJ introduces Ash, Pikachu, and Charmander to his family's pet Mareep, beaming that he helped raise this little one from an egg. Mareep seems just as excited to see him, nuzzling the green-haired youth when he gets close enough. It is a sweet moment. However, it seems that it was not meant to last, as a few minutes later a loud rap on the front door forces AJ to get up. Wondering aloud who else his mother might be expecting, he swings open the door, only to be blown back by a wall of noise, as the sound of a heavily amplified electric guitar fills his house. Rushing to see the source, Ash spies a girl with white hair pointing a finger accusatorially at AJ, shouting in a way that only those who have honed their voices to cut through the screaming of crowds can. She declares that she has come here to defeat AJ for the honor of the Verbank Gym. AJ, having landed on his butt after the auditory sneak attack, gets up with a frown and tells the girl, who he names Roxy, to let it go already. Roxy petulantly refuses, saying he will come with her now, so that they may have their fated battle. AJ refuses once more, turning his back on her, only to freeze when she taunts that Benga was right. He truly is a coward. AJ bristles under this accusation, snapping that he is not a coward, but Roxy taunts him again, saying that he's running away from a fight like one. Ash steps in here to defend his friend, demanding to know where Roxy gets off calling AJ a coward, but she tells him not to butt in, since this is between the two of them, and it's a matter of pride. AJ briefly elaborates, telling Ash that he was the league's first pick to be the Verbank City gym leader, but he turned it down, and Roxy's never gotten over that fact. Ash, remembering that being a gym leader is AJ's dream, asks why he refused, but AJ grimly replies that he didn't earn the position, so it wouldn't have meant anything. Roxy rebuffs that if that is his objection, he should be jumping at her challenge, since it will finally prove once and for all which of them is most worthy to be the gym leader. AJ grits his teeth, saying that very well he'll face her, but not for some stupid grudge match. It took Master Red beating him for him to realize what a jerk he'd been, so he's gonna pay it forward to her now. He then gives Ash an apologetic look, asking him to say sorry to Master Red for him, since he's probably gonna be late to the meeting. Ash says it's no problem, and the pair fist bump. Mareep then bleats its desire to help in the fight, and AJ accepts, taking it and Charmander with him as he follows Roxy back towards the Verbank gym. At this point, Gary re-enters the room to find AJ gone, and after a brief rundown from Ash, sighs that he should have known something like this would happen, since Ashy Boy's always been a magnet for misadventures, and it seems like that's only amplified since teaming up with Red. He then updates Ash on the older situation, saying that Blue told him to stick to the plan of meeting Red and Nimbasa at the prearranged time, while he will go to collect the Unovan champ. Ash asks how they are getting to Nimbasa, and Gary admits that he isn't sure. If Blue hadn't been forced to go get Alder, he could have given them a lift on Charizard, but as it stands, their best bet is to return to Verbank and try their luck with Blastoise. Ash questions if they can really make the meeting time with that strategy, and Gary sighs that they probably can't, but it's the only option they have for getting to Nimbasa City. AJ's mother returns at this point, smiling that she couldn't help but overhear their predicament, and thankfully she knows a faster and more reliable way to reach the city. Ash excitedly asks what it is, and she explains that there is a battle subway station in Verbank City, and if these two young men are anything like her son, they should have no problem riding the line all the way to the end. Ash and Gary ask what a battle subway is exactly, and the woman laughs that she forgot they're from the boonies, before correcting herself and saying that she meant they're from Kanto. She then explains that a battle subway is a train that travels under Unova to and from Nimbasa City, and that if a trainer is able to fight their way to the subway bosses in the final car and beat them, then they can ride the line for free. Gary asks what happens if they can't, and AJ's mother replies that if they lose, they are immediately ejected and have to walk back to the terminal. Ash gulps at this, but despite any misgivings he may have, he knows the battle subway is their best option. Unfortunately, this is not the only shock in store for them, as upon arriving in the subway station, the duo learn that the only type of train leaving from Verbank today is the doubles train, meaning that if they want to ride, they will have to fight as a tag team. Neither Ash nor Gary particularly likes this idea, but when they look at each other, they both realize teamwork is their best chance at getting to their destination on time, and so with matching resigned sighs, accept the terms of the battle subway. And so the battles begin, both in the subway and in the gym. Though Ash and Gary are faced with the prospect of battling 21 teams compared to AJ's single opponent, it cannot be said that he is having an easier time, as Charmander, who is giving its all with a torrent of flamethrowers against Roxy's coughing, is continually thwarted by carefully timed gyro balls. By using these, the poison Pokemon is able to create a shield of air, which prevents the flames from reaching and igniting the toxic gases inside it. It is a steep challenge to say the least, but the young Unovan has faith in his Pokemon, and his training. Meanwhile, Ash and Gary finally beat their third set of opponents, allowing them to pass through the first car. Their synchronicity is far from perfect, but their innate talent, honed through training with Red and Blue, is enough to allow them to brute force their way through most obstacles. The second car does prove somewhat problematic, however, as one of their opponents possesses a Torterra, and in accordance with the rules of the subway, Ash and Gary must use the same pair of Pokemon throughout the trip, meaning that despite the disadvantageous matchup, they send out Pikachu and Blastoise. The duo both know what a bad match this is for them, but Gary, ever the tactician, tells Ash to focus on the other Pokemon, that being a Beartic, since his Blastoise can do more damage to Torterra and endure more hits thanks to its thick shell. He then calls for a Bite, which connects with Torterra, dealing moderate damage, but leaving it open to a Giga Drain in return, which even Withdraw cannot protect Blastoise from. Breaking protocol, Ash has Pikachu divert the quick attack it was aiming at Beartic towards Torterra. Though this does little actual damage, it is enough of a distraction to halt Giga Drain, thus allowing Blastoise to use Bite again on the bulky grass type. Torterra howls in pain at this, allowing Pikachu to return to its previous plan of quick attacking Beartic, followed by a Thunderbolt which breaks through the Polar Bear's Ice Beam counterattack. However, this stationary position makes it a prime target for a super effective Earthquake from Torterra. Ash yells at Pikachu to be careful, but the attack is already underway, with the floor of the subway car buckling underneath them all. Pikachu squeals in terror, but stops when it's knocked off its feet by a blast of pressurized water from Blastoise. At first, Ash is angry, calling Gary a traitor, but when the Oak Boy calls him a loser and tells him to open his eyes rather than his mouth for once, Ash realizes what actually happened. Gary had Blastoise knock Pikachu out of the danger zone, even though it meant giving up a chance to protect itself. Grinning to himself that Gary is a sly one indeed, Ash endeavours not to let Blastoise's assistance go to waste, and so has Pikachu use Thunderbolt. Thanks to all the water in the air and ground from Blastoise, plus the fact that they're in a superconductive metal box, this can't help but score a direct hit on Beartic, with enough force to knock it out. From there, the 2v1 against Torterra is a cakewalk, with the Pallet Boys coming to see the value of teamwork, even if the other is still the last person they would willingly choose as a partner. Back at the gym, Charmander has been returned to its ball for a rest, having suffered a toxic Venoshock combo that would have felled a lesser Pokemon. Now it is Mareep's time to shine, and picking up where Charmander left off, it conducts electricity through its fleece to fire off a Thunderbolt at Coughing. Coughing once more uses a Gyro Ball as a shield, before coming in with a Venoshock. The brave little sheep valiantly tanks this hit, its wool turning purple as the noxious sludge coats it. However, it is not fated to stay that way long, as when AJ cries that he knows it can stay standing, it bars to the heavens then begins to glow. Rising up onto 2 feet, the newly evolved Flaffy then leaps into the air and uses one of its newly acquired shoulders to ram Coughing with a takedown. While this isn't enough to actually take the poison type down, it does knock it out of the air and paralyze it, leaving it wide open for a Thunderbolt that finishes the job. With one of Roxy's Pokemon down at last, AJ cheers, but Roxy smirks that he still has 2 stronger foes to go before bringing out her Scolipede. Knowing his type matchups, AJ recognizes Barbaracle as the best choice for this fight, and so brings it out as his final Pokemon. At first, the Water Rock type snarls at its trainer for disturbing its slumber, but when it spots Scolipede, something glints in its eyes that makes it forget all about AJ. Hammering on its chest with Shell Smash, Barbaracle bellows a challenge to the poison bug, who responds with a screech. AJ covers his ears, but Barbaracle doesn't flinch, simply continuing to destroy more of its own armor while barking for the bug to try again. Scolipede next tries Sludge Bomb, with toxic ooze splattering all over Barbaracle, and some of its rocky exterior even beginning to melt as something corrosive in the sludge eats away at it. However, Barbaracle remains literally and figuratively stony-faced, as it just smashes these damaged bits next, so that now it has no armor at all. In an attempt at a Hail Mary, the now flustered Scolipede then tries a Rock Tomb, causing jagged rocks to burst up on all sides of the barnacled bruiser, trapping it up to the neck in solid stone. Or so Roxy and Scolipede think, right up until one of Barbaracle's arms punches cleanly through the rock. The remaining 3 then do likewise, and as they flex, the stones shatter into shards. Grabbing one from the air, Barbaracle then runs in unbidden, and uses the rock like brass knuckles to deliver a stone edge to Scolipede's face. Clearly the Water Rock type is unimpressed with the poison bug's power, as it does not hold back, knocking its foe out in a single hit. Roxy then brings out her last Pokemon, Low-Key Toxtricity, and AJ grins that Barbaracle can easily beat this lazy-looking Pokemon for sure. Unfortunately, Barbaracle agrees, and so seeing no challenge in the fight jumps off the arena, earning the declaration of forfeit from the referee. The doubles train is now well over halfway to Nimbasa, and so are Ash and Gary more than halfway through their gamut of foes. Each battle has been a testament to their growing teamwork, with Blastoise and Pikachu becoming more in sync as their trainers do likewise. However, their teamwork is promptly put to the test when a Sork and Throw tag team enter the fray. Having deemed Pikachu the weakest link, Sork uses its speed and maneuverability to get in close, while Throw holds off Blastoise, preventing it from interfering. Blastoise even attempts to repeat the feint it pulled against Chuck's Poliwrath, by leveling its cannons at the opponent, only to attack with its shoulder instead. But Throw is ready for this, and so uses a Circle Throw to neutralize the attacks and throw Blastoise into a window, shattering the glass. This creates a vacuum which pulls Sork and Pikachu towards it and off their feet as the lightest of the Pokemon. Pikachu is able to use this to its advantage, zipping into the air and out of Sork's reach with a quick attack, while Sork slams back first into the hole, creating a plug while also holding the fighting type in place. This looks like a prime moment to end things, and so Ash calls for a Volt Tackle. Electricity forms around Pikachu, and it hurtles towards its helpless quarry, causing Sork and its trainer to scream in terror. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, the electricity fades, causing a stunned Pikachu to bounce harmlessly off of Sork. Sork then drops a fist on top of Pikachu's head, and it looks like the electric rodent might be done for, but thankfully Blastoise is still kicking, and having dispatched Throw while all attention was on the broken window and Pikachu, it is able to fire off a Hydro Pump which hits the blue martial artist in the back of the head, and knocks it out just as promptly. Ash and Gary then proceed to the third last carriage, and as they do, the grandson of Professor Oak asks his rival what Volt Tackle is. Ash explains, giving a brief rundown of what Surge told him in his training to get it. Gary listens to all this with great interest, but when Ash is done, he fixes him with a serious look and says that he shouldn't use that move again unless the situation is truly dire, since if he can't control it, it might cost them everything. Flaffy is unable to battle. Toxtricity wins! This ruling fills the Verbank gym, and with it, AJ withdraws his old friend. Now he and Roxy are both down to their final Pokemon, and thanks to Flaffy's guts, Toxtricity isn't looking so hot. However, neither is Charmander when it's brought back out, and the first thing it does is twitch, due to the poison still coursing in its veins. Fiercely, AJ cries for Charmander to bring it home, while Roxy tells Toxtricity to rock on. The two reptilian Pokemon then go for broke, using their best moves right out of the gate. For Charmander this is Flamethrower, while for Toxtricity it's Boom Burst. The attacks meet in the middle, and the shockwave is enough to almost blow the pair of Pokemon and their trainers off their feet. But even still, Charmander and Toxtricity stand proud. Charmander is clearly at the greater disadvantage, as it has to keep producing flames to hold Boom Burst at bay, while in contrast, Toxtricity has already used its attack, so it merely stands there, playing an air guitar in time with Roxy as she strums out what she calls AJ's swan song. However, AJ is not willing to give up, and even as Boom Burst ekes closer and closer, chipping away at the last embers of Charmander's strength, he continues to shout his praise for the little lizard. Charmander hears this, and in contrast to Damien knows that it has a true partner in AJ. This gives it strength, so that even when Boom Burst is inches away from its snout, it continues to fight, letting the fire in its belly power the flames of its breath. And through the force of this resolve, it actually manages to grind Boom Burst to a stop. Then the true miracle occurs. It starts to push it back, slowly at first, and only by fractions of a centimeter, but each second it is growing further and further away from it and closer to Toxtricity. And then it begins to pick up speed, visibly moving backwards, then soaring, catching fire so that it becomes a blazing knife of highly pressurized air aimed squarely at the poison type. And here the nature of Boom Burst becomes a double-edged sword. Unlike the constant exertion of Flamethrower, which could be amplified through force of will, there is nothing Toxtricity can do to empower Boom Burst to push it back again, and so the Poison Electric type's only choice is to try and destroy the attack before it can come back to destroy it. Firing off another Boom Burst, in the hope that the two moves will cancel each other out, Roxy and Toxtricity realize their error too late, as the flaming rebounded Boom Burst does not clash with the second one, but instead dissipates it, before exploding out, and using all the newly scattered oxygen atoms to blanket the entire field in fire. Both trainers scream as the roars of the flames blanket any cries their burning Pokemon could make, and it's anyone's guess if either Pokemon is still standing there. Then, as the flames subside, they hear a single thud through the smoke. Calling out their partners' names, AJ and Roxy then run in, fanning away the fumes in search of their friends. Roxy finds Toxtricity first, and it is flat on its stomach unconscious, but AJ has a harder time finding Charmander. Then, in the heart of the smoke cloud, he sees a flicker of orange and runs towards it, calling Charmander's name. Finally the smoke clears, and AJ sees it, Charmander unscathed and veiled in swirling flames. As the flames fade and it leaps into AJ's arms, the green-haired youth laughs, marveling at how clever Charmander is to have taught itself fire spin in the heat of battle. Roxy then approaches and apologizes for being a jerk, saying that AJ really is the best, just like him. AJ shakes his head at this, saying that one day he will be the best, but he's still got a long way to go, and when he gets there, it will be because he walked his own path and earned every win, not ridden the coattails of someone else. At last, Ash and Gary have made it to the final car, and waiting for them are the subway bosses Ingo and Emmett, with an Electros and a Chandelure. In unison, the twin conductors welcome them, but warn that their journey ends here. In his usual cocky voice, Gary says, well, obviously it ends here. They just have to beat them and then they can enjoy the rest of the trip in peace. A claim which flusters Emmett a bit, as he breaks sync to say that no, it ends here because they're going to lose. This makes Ash and Gary smirk in unison, and then as one they call for the move they've devised through their trek up this train, Electric Hydro Pump. At once, Pikachu hops onto Blastoise's back, and as the blue turtle fires water from its twin cannons, Pikachu lets electricity flow from its cheeks to electrify the streams. Both streams are directed at Ingo's Chandelure in an attempt to take it out early thanks to type matchups. But quick as a flash, Emmett's Electros comes to the rescue, using its 6-foot-long body to entirely cover Chandelure. Emmett then grins that though the boys' tag team tactics are impressive, he and Ingo are the greatest double battle duo in the world. So as he alluded to earlier, Ash and Gary's journey will end here in defeat, since unlike other Pokemon, Electros has no weaknesses for them to exploit. Ash and Gary blanch at this suggestion, with Gary saying it's impossible since no Pokemon is completely without weaknesses, but Ingo confirms his brother's statement, saying that Electros, thanks to its typing and ability, has no type it is weak to. Ash says that doesn't matter, since even without a weakness, it can still be beaten if they just hit it hard enough. He then exemplifies this philosophy by calling for a quick attack, but from within the protective cocoon, a pair of yellow eyes glow blue, as Chandelure uses Psychic to stop Pikachu in its tracks. The black-clad subway boss then sticks out an arm and declares that Ash may be right, but he is not just a passenger in this battle, he is Emmett's protector just as Emmett is his. Emmett then throws out his own arm so that his and Ingo's cross, declaring that they are a perfect pair, an unbeatable team. They then both go back to back and in unison point at Ash and Gary, finishing their declaration with, "We are brothers." Gary smirks that he and Ash may not have a cute choreographed little dance sequence, but in a way they're brothers too. They're both sons of Pallet Town, they're the heirs apparent to the greatest trainers in the world, and they've been rivals since the day they were born, pushing each other to be better. Ash then adds his own voice to Gary's, grinning that maybe that isn't enough to beat the self-proclaimed greatest double battle duo in the world. But this whole trip has forced them to look out for each other, to learn and adapt, and it's forged them into a single unit. And there's no way they're going to let down themselves, their mentors, or each other by losing right at the end. Pikachu then goes shooting forward out of Chandelure's grip, and the subway bosses realize that Blastoise blasted Pikachu with Hydro Pump to free it. Now the electric mouse is free, it uses a series of mid-air quick attacks to jump from place to place, so that Chandelure can't get a lock on it, before crashing into Electros. Electros hisses but swats Pikachu aside with its tail, before uncoiling itself slightly to fire off a discharge. Blastoise and Pikachu are forced to scatter in the face of an attack that can hit them both. But unfortunately, Blastoise as the slower and bulkier of the two finds this to be a difficult task. Ash therefore has Pikachu intercept the discharge aimed for Blastoise, knowing that while not very effective on his starter, it could be devastating on the water type. Gary thanks Ash for the assist, but then asks if he'd be willing to trust him once more, since he might have an idea on how to win this, but it'll risk exposing Pikachu to some serious damage. Ash asks Pikachu if he's okay with this, and when the electric rodent nods, Ash tells Gary to give the order. Gary then tells Ash to try and make Electros attack Pikachu again, and so Ash calls for a Thunderbolt. This hits and Emmett grins that he calls that a Thunderbolt. This is a Thunderbolt, before having Electros slightly unfurl again. This is exactly the opening Gary was looking for, and he has Blastoise dash in and grab Electros' head while it's still slightly poking out, grinning that since Electros doesn't want to hurt Chandelure, it has to move away and briefly expose itself in order to attack. Speaking of Chandelure, the Fire Ghost attempts to immobilize Blastoise here so that Electros can break free, but quick-thinking Ash has Pikachu use Thunderbolt on it, dealing damage and acting as a nice distraction. By now Blastoise has a good grip on Electros' head, and so Gary tells it to use Rapid Spin, causing Blastoise's head and limbs, including the hand holding Electros, to retract into its shell as it spins rapidly. Though this cannot damage Chandelure, when Blastoise pops its head and limbs back out, Electros is thoroughly tangled up with no chance of escape. This puts it in a prime position for a Hydro Pump Bite combo. Emmett tries to capitalize by having Electros fire back with Thunderbolt, and while this does manage super effective damage on Blastoise, the big turtle keeps blasting and biting so that before long, both Pokemon collapse in unison. Gary then looks to Ash with a smile, and tells him to win this for both of them. Ash nods, and tells Pikachu there's only one surefire way they can win this. Pikachu nods back at its trainer, and then, on Ash's command, launches into Volt Tackle. Bright electricity bathes Pikachu as it dashes forward, turning its own kinetic energy into strength for the attack, while also turning excess power into kinetic energy to give it speed. It is one hand helping the other, and it is far too much for Chandelure to stop with Psychic. When this becomes clear, Ingo tells his partner to use Will-O-Wisp, but Pikachu effortlessly dodges this, closing in on Chandelure with every passing second. Now getting desperate, Ingo tells his Pokemon to fly up, but even this cannot save it from Pikachu, as it leaps into the air and crashes into its opponent with flawless accuracy, speed, and power. Every window in the compartment shatters from the shockwave, and when the Pokemon fall, Pikachu is panting, shaking, and wincing all at once, but it is still standing. Chandelure, however, is not. And with that, the victory goes to the Pallet Boys. Ingo and Emma take off their hats to Ash and Gary in a sign of deference, and it is only at this moment that Ash realizes the train stopped a while ago. Looking around as if coming out of a daze, he grins at Gary that they won, and the boys high-five, and then better still, he sees Red watching from the platform. Scooping up Pikachu, Ash runs over to his mentor, beaming and asking if he saw his battle. And then, as he gets close, Ash finally sees the look on Red's face, and it is one of horror. When the champ speaks, it is in a choked, hoarse voice, and he can only manage 5 words. Ash, what have you done? And that's where we'll leave things. What has got Red so upset? What is the story behind AJ and the nickname Allie? And how will our scattered heroes reunite in time? Find out as the journey continues.